Hello, my name's Allan Cheapshot, and I've been asked to come on this podcast to talk about Victor Quiñones, so here I am. So, big fan of pro wrestling, as some of you may know who follow me online. Those who don't, hello, pleased to meet you. So, I want to talk about Victor Quiñones. So, the first thing I'd like to say about him is, what a character, what a sleazy, some might say. He came across as that to me anyway, character. Always had a cigar in his mouth, always had dark glasses on, and always was wearing a suit. But that isn't why I'm here to talk about him. I'm here to talk about kind of what I liked about him. And me, I'm a big fan of weird Japanese wrestling, or was in the 90s, and Victor played a huge part in that. My initial fandom, like most people in the UK, where I'm from, is you find wrestling either locally through local wrestling, or you watch WWF at the time, and maybe a bit of WCW, and then from there you kind of open your horizons. One promotion that really stood out to me was Wing. Wrestling International, New Generation. I know Victor had a hand in forming that. But before I get too ahead of myself, a bit of background on Victor. No, he wasn't Gorilla Monsoon's son. Yes, he had a significant amount of money. Yes, he got some of that money from his mother. She owned a hotel, I believe. That hotel in Puerto Rico was where a lot of wrestlers stayed. So Gorilla Monsoon being one of those wrestlers who, when he came over to work in Puerto Rico, so he struck up a friendship with him and others. He would, offer the guys drinks, things like that, to curry favour with them. And then he started getting into their inner circle a little bit more and learning about the inner workings of pro wrestling. What makes, an audience tick? How can you fool an audience? How can you promote, etc.? So Victor learned that under the learning tree of all these American wrestlers, predominantly in the 80s. He'd also fly to New York. I think he had family in New York. He was able then to catch shows in Madison Square Garden. I think he got comps from Gorilla, so he got some good seats there, and that's how he sort of started in pro wrestling. I'm not going to talk about his time in Puerto Rico for the IWA. That's not my forte, that's not my expertise. I'll leave that up to others like Jesus or others who are on this podcast to talk about that. What I want to remember is Victor Quiñones in Wing, in IWA. So these are garbage promotions, as they were called in Japan in the 90s. The first major popular one was FMW under Atsushi Onita, and then some others spun up, seeing the success that Onita got through the magazines, drawing huge crowds at Kawasaki Stadium every year and having a decent business where he would run tours, 20 shows at a time, and do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 upwards thousand people at these shows. Victor decided, I can do this better, I'm going to form Wing. So Wing was interesting to me, and I really, really, really liked Wing. It appealed to me because it was so weird with some of the characters that they had, some of the sleazy wrestlers. I mean, the main guy that stands out is Mr. Danger, Matsunaga. He's the main one that really kind of opened my eyes to kind of the world of garbage wrestling outside of FMW. He was in FMW before he left, and he was in Wing. I also remember the Wing match where Wing Kanemaru got powerbombed onto the mat that was soaked in lighter fluid, and it was burning, and it burnt all his back. That's another memory from Wing. But with Victor himself, he'd always play that sleazy heel on screen. He would always be surrounded by a group of wrestlers, mainly the Headhunters, them being identical twins. They were sometimes referred to, if people remember this, as the twin sons of Abdullah the Butcher, which is quite interesting. They were very short guys, stocky and short, but for the size they were, they could move around the ring. They were doing moonsaults and things. The only other person of that size who was doing that in that era was someone like Big Van Vader. So he'd surround himself with guys like the Headhunters, with Leatherface, those sort of wrestlers. He'd always be at ringside, like I said, looking dodgy, looking like he's up to no good. And I liked his general sleaziness. he was also in FMW, went back to FMW, was part of the Funk Masters of Wrestling in 1996, so stable with Terry Funk. He had Mike Awesome in there, he had the Headhunters again, and others. So he was in that stable as well. I think Victor Quiñones also was a huge influence and helped a few wrestlers during his time. I know Taka Michinoku is one. He really, really was appreciative of Victor opening the door to WWF in 1997 for Taka Michinoku and got him booked there and got him a contract there. I know Yoshihiro Tajiri is another one who worked a lot in IWA Japan to cut his teeth in 95. Another Victor promotion. IWA, you'll probably remember, hosted the King of the Deathmatch tournament, or Kawasaki Dream, the big tournament where the final was Terry Funk versus Cactus Jack Mick Foley. That was very, very popular in tape trading, especially in the US and the UK. So Victor himself was always on those fringes. He was always trying to strike a deal, always playing more of a role than you probably realised in pro wrestling in Japan. I know that he had another side hustle as well where he'd import Japanese merchandise, wrestling merchandise, and sell that in the US and I think Puerto Rico as well, I'm guessing. And that brought in a big chunk of change for him. So he did well, in that way as well. So what I also enjoyed about Victor Quiñones is he would get these Japanese wrestlers, like I touched on, those bookings outside of Japan. So in Puerto Rico, in America, and in Mexico. I know I was reading off the screen now. One of the quotes I wanted to read was from Win Kanamura. If I didn't meet him, maybe I would die in middle of America. As he arrived in North America with 20 cents to his name, and Victor took care of him. Tajiri, again, who I mentioned, referred to Victor as his biggest mentor in the business. So, Victor did do some good things for a lot of people. He was that person that loved pro wrestling. And anyone that loves pro wrestling and decides to then get involved and set up their own promotion is good by me. They're taking a risk. So good on Victor Quiñones. What a guy. I'll raise my pretend glass to him and salute him. I don't think we see many characters like Victor anymore, which is a shame. I'm sure others will be on this show today talking more in depth about Victor. But to me, I just liked his overall look, his aura, his general sleaziness, and his love for pro wrestling. Thanks guys for listening.